So I saw another horror movie that you might not know exists. You might not have ever heard about this movie. It is called Darling. So before I get into the plot of this film, I might as well warn you, this is a black and white film, and if you're not a fan of black and white, if you don't want to see a movie that's in black and white, this will most likely not be the film for you. It's not going to be the one to convert you and change you into liking black and white films. Trust me, I know a few people out there that refuse to see a black and white film because it looks too old to them and they will never see a black and white film. I know a few people personally. Darling is a simple premise. Ultimately, it's about a young girl in New York that is house sitting for this other person, and she's left alone in this big house.
Number by the phone. Feel free to call any time about anything, even to say hello.
I will.
You're a doll. Toodaloo.
But there are a few odd things about it. For one, the last caretaker committed suicide by jumping out of the window. There's also a room that's always locked that she's not allowed to go into. And she even finds an upside-down cross in a dresser drawer. While she's alone in the house, she slowly starts to lose her mind. But then again, she might not have been all that there to begin with. There's also a lot more to it than just being alone in the house, but I don't want to get into too much detail because this is one of those movies that you'd rather discover it for yourself as you watch it, because this is a movie where there definitely could be a few different interpretations to some of the things going on in the film. Now, Darling is not going to be for everyone. It's one of those horror movies that doesn't give you a full straight answer. There's definitely more interpretations that can be made about the film. It's also one of those horror movies where you have to look in deeper and come up with your own conclusions. Now, it still does this in a bit more of a mainstream way where it's less difficult to make interpretations, but for some people it's still going to be too much of a hassle to go into it and actually think. This definitely has a very classic horror movie vibe to it. Not only is it black and white, it also is a little bit slower pace, and the things the movie decides to show and not show does feel classic horror movie. It still has a modern twist because it is still faster paced than some of the slower paced horror movies out there. And there is a scene or two where it does get really graphic and gory. The movie definitely picks up to a point where it feels more like modern horror. And I feel if you have enough patience with the movie to get to that point, then you're going to come out loving the film, or at least liking it. Now, the movie itself is quite trippy. You see, our main character is losing her mind, but rather than show us plot-wise and show it through her actions, through most of the film, it shows it through the film itself. Because there are many times where the film will just do these crazy edits, where it shows things further into the film, things from the past, things that aren't part of the film at all. It does these little quick, random cuts interspersed through these moments where it feels chaotic. It almost feels like the film itself is going crazy. It's definitely bold, and I do like that sense of the film because it never gets so chaotic, so hectic, where you can't understand what the hell is going on. It's not like High Rise, where it gets so chaotic towards the end where things just aren't explained all that well. But these sudden flashes and quick edits might be a little jarring for some people. There's also not a lot of dialogue in this film, so it's a lot of just watching the actors on screen and trying to interpret what's going on. I'm sure there's one true ending, one true reason for everything that's going on in the house, but there's enough different supernatural possibilities mentioned throughout the film where you can come into it with different interpretations, or at least have a feeling of where you know the movie is going, and then ultimately it not going in that direction. Like, it's one of those movies where I was watching it and I was trying to figure out, okay, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen? Oh, this could possibly happen, or maybe this is happening, and then find out later on that, okay, that's not what's happening. It was really fun in that sense. It's one of those movies where you have to go into it with an open mind and have to go into it not knowing all that much about it, because then you'll get the better experience, and you might want to watch it a second time to make sure your interpretation of the film holds up. I know I love to do that sometimes with movies, and The Darling is no exception. But even so, there are things in this film that could be really disappointing to some and were a little bit disappointing for me as well. For one, there's a locked room in the house that our main character wants to get into. So there's a lot of emphasis on this room, and you kind of know what might have happened in the room before, why it's locked up. But when our main girl finally opens the door, finally looks into it, and you see her horrified expression, you ultimately never see what's actually in the door for yourself. So you physically don't know what is in it and what made her so horrified. It's left to interpretation, but I can see why that might be really disappointing to some. Also, the first couple chapters of the film, yeah, it is divided into chapters, might be a little boring for some because ultimately it is her just walking around the house and we don't know much about what is going on in the film and what's going to take place. And so ultimately it's really the middle of the film that's really the meat of the story and the thing that most people are going to like and get drawn to because something is happening. Overall, I still really like this film, but it definitely could be disappointing to many people, especially if you're not used to this type of film or this type of horror film. But I do encourage you to see the film, see it with an open mind, and hopefully you'll like it as much as I do. I'm going to give Darling 4 stars. So have you seen Darling? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment. If you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews of 2015 and 2016. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this is Just My Opinion.